Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Animex and our next speaker this evening. To kick us off, we have Daniel Crook. Daniel is a graduate of Teesside University, so we're really pleased to welcome him back. Daniel has worked professionally in both 2D and 3D animation projects. He's worked on things such as Doctor Who, Ethel and Ernest, and We're Going on a Bear Hunt. For the last 2 years, he's been living in Madrid, working as a 2D mid-animator on the revolutionary Oscar-nominated feature film Klaus. So Daniel is happy to join us, and he's going to share his experiences working under the direction of the animation legend Sergio Pablos at SPA Studios. Daniel, I'm just going to switch over to you.
Okay, can you hear me and see me?
Yes, we can.
Great. I'll share
so,
my screen.
Yes, please.
Let me press the present button. Okay, hey everyone. Thank you for coming to the talk. It's really great to be here at Animex. So yeah, like Tim was saying, I'm fortunate enough to work in 2D and 3D animation. And today I want to talk to you about strategies for working as an animator. So really, I mean, I know that Klaus was so exciting, and I'm going to talk about Klaus a lot. But as I was kind of thinking about what I'm going to talk about, I really wanted to share something practical, something that you could take home with today that will be useful for right now. So I'm going to be talking about some things I've learned for strategies for getting into top studios, strategies for animating complex scenes, and that is the real juicy one that I wanted to talk to you about. And then strategies for developing yourself as an artist. Okay, so strategies for getting into top studios. So about 5 years ago, I was actually at Animex as a Teesside student, and I just finished my placement year at a small motion graphics company called Smart Cookie. And I wanted to be an animator, but while I was there, I pretty much did everything but animating. I did 3D modeling, topology, texturing, flash animation, some e-learning courses, which were really boring. And I kind of felt like a little bit like I was maybe wasting my time. But after that year, you know, I went back to university, did my final year, and I focused on animation. I did 2 shots. One was a close-up animation. One was a action sequence. And at Animex 5 years ago, I got to show different people these shots. And one of them was a guy called Stafford, who was from Double Negative. And you know, he gave me some notes on these shots. And a few months later, I was applying to every studio that I could think of. And I managed to get an interview at Blue Zoo. And I also got an interview at DNEG. And that interview came about because someone from my placement year company, Smart Cookie, they'd actually gone to Double Negative whilst I was away on studies. And when they heard that they were looking for a junior animator, they put my name forward. And so they recommended me for the job. And so I turn up, and the person who interviews me was Stafford, the person I'd already met at Animex. And he remembered me, he remembered my work, and he got to see that I'd actually done the notes which he had given me. And that kind of coupled as well with the fact that I had another interview somewhere else, which is putting a little bit of pressure on them, was what cultivated in me getting that first job in Double Negative as a junior animator. And I got to work on a TV show called Fungus the Bogeyman. So just out of that little story, there's a few lessons I think about strategies for getting into top studios. Firstly, something I've learned is that it's okay to start at the bottom. So I know that everybody wants that golden ticket internship placement, you know, at a top studio, instant success. And while that is, I'm sure, a great experience, for 99% of us, that's not how we get there. And yet, you know, you can still become a great artist. In fact, I think it can be to your benefit. A lot of the times, I think it can be to your benefit to start at the bottom, because when you are finally given that opportunity, you know, that you want, you come with all this experience of other parts of the pipeline, of being a team player, of learning what it's like as a whole, you know, as the industry as a whole. Whereas someone who goes straight to, you know, say an animating position, they're not getting that understanding of what it's like to be an in-betweener or a cleanup artist. So that they approach their shots with less experience. Secondly, this is kind of an obvious one, but be good. You know, I hear a lot of people say, especially in the animation industry, that it's all about who you know. And while that's true, there's a danger in there to think that it's all to do with just contacts. But the thing is, I would never have got that job at Double Negative if I was bad in that company. The only reason that I was remembered was that I was enthusiastic, I was passionate, and you know, I had a bit of a spark about me, I guess. And I think when you're a junior or an intern, you have a unique opportunity to shine. When you have experience, when you're a mid-animator or a senior animator, people kind of expect you to be good. But when you're a junior or an intern, you have the opportunity to surprise people, and you know, you can be remembered better. You know, and then lastly, this is kind of one that is for me really is one that is more personal to me that I've experienced. I'm not saying this is an absolute rule of thumb, but I found that when I have interviews, when I have multiple interviews, I tend to be, if this feels appropriate to the conversation, honest about the other offers that I'm receiving, the other interviews, just so that they know that, you know, what I'm being honest about, what I'm thinking about. And I don't lose the fact that I'm interested in working for them and why I'm interested in working for them. But I want to let them know, I think it's just good to let them know that you're wanted. You know, it doesn't do any harm for them to know that other people want you. So I was at Double Negative. I was there for 6 months, and I really wanted to work in 2D animation as well. You know, I love both mediums, and this opportunity came up to work as a in-betweener at Lupus Films, and they made The Snowman, and they were making this feature film called Ethel and Ernest, and they were looking for in-betweeners. So I went and I did this test with about 20 other people, young people my age. And you were given a shot which had already been finished, and you were there the whole day, and you had to try and do all of the in-betweens. And so I did that. It's very realistic, subtle animation. I did my best, but actually I failed. And so I sent them a very nice email back saying, you know, thank you very much for the opportunity. Is there any way you could let me know what I did wrong so that I can improve for next time? And the supervisor, you know, was very kind, and she said, you know, why don't you just come and have another go, because we're going to do another batch of students. And so I said, thank you. This is the opportunity that I needed. And I did it again, and I must have gotten in by the skin of my teeth. And that is what got me into Lupus Films as a trainee. And so I began doing in-betweens, and eventually I grew. I was there for about 1.5 years. I was a key assistant, which means that you do the main key cleanup drawings. but you don't necessarily do all the in-betweens. So I was a cleanup artist, and then eventually I was an animator on their short film called We're Going on a Bear Hunt. And then kind of 2D dried up a little bit for me. And I didn't have enough contacts at this point to continue, you know, going into commercials or anything. So I went back into visual effects, and I went to a studio called Milk. And there I got to work on Doctor Who, which was great. And at the back of my mind was Klaus. You know, I'd seen the teaser when I was at university, and just like everybody else, I thought this was, you know, the best project you could possibly want to work on. But it was miles away, and it was it felt like another level, another world. But I got the opportunity to do a cleanup test, and I had to do it whilst I was working full time at Milk. So the only way I could do that was to borrow a companion Cintiq and to do this on the train home each day. And all of the lines were wobbly because of the train wobbling, and it was more than that. I don't think I was that great, you know, at doing this cleanup test. It was very, very, very hard. And I failed again. And so I thought, okay, that door is shut. And I was able to get some commercial work, 2D commercial work, and started to get about 6 months of 2D animation, slowly building that up. And then after 6 months, some of my colleagues were getting hired as animators on Klaus, and they were doing these animation tests. And so I asked if I could do one. And so I got 3 weeks, and this is the test that I did. Hopefully you're going to be able to hear it. You got to choose between 2 different audio clips, and I chose this one because it had a bit more variety. It was in the original trailer. Let me know if you can't hear it.
Good morning, madam. Ah, and a good morning it is indeed. For you see, today is the day when progress arrives in this remote, albeit quite charming little town of yours.
Okay, hopefully you heard that. But that's what it took to get me just in to Spark Studios as an animator, as a junior animator, and that began the journey for me on Klaus. So just the last things I want to say about getting into top studios. So failure is part of the process. I think as artists, especially animation artists, we have to come to have a good relationship with this idea of failure, because when you're failing, I've heard it said, when you're failing, you're doing something. You know, failures are lessons. They are rejecting the things which are not true, and you are walking towards the thing that you want to be doing, right? And something that encourages me is that Sergio Pablos, who I think is arguably the greatest artist, you know, animation artist alive at the moment, and he has mastered more crafts than anyone could wish. You know, he's a master animator, he's a master character designer. He designed, you know, a lot of the characters that he worked on, storyboard artist, a writer, film director, filmmaker. So he's mastered a lot of crafts, but he's very open about how failure was part of his journey. When he was an animator at Disney in Paris, he worked on several films. One of them was Hunchback of Notre Dame. And he is very open about the fact that he was one of the worst draftsmen in that studio. Now, I don't know how true that is and how humble he's being, but he said that he needed to come away and learn to draw better. And actually, even after Disney and all that was finished, and he started his own studio in Madrid, he tried to sell pictures of films, you know, and one of them was Despicable Me, one of them was Smallfoot. But there were many other pictures which never saw fruition. And there was many other films before Klaus, which he wanted to make, which even, you know, have teasers and stuff for, which never saw the light of day. And even Klaus, which is, you know, a masterpiece really, was rejected by everybody until eventually they got to Netflix and they said yes. And that was the, you know, the first one. So failure is part of the process, and we have to come to a good understanding that it's okay to fail and learn to be able to get back up again and, learn that that is part of what we do. And the last thing is that I found it really helpful to develop a complementary skill. And for me, it's doing 2D and 3D animation. It's because when I mean by complementary, what I mean by complementary is that they are related. So when I learn 3D animation, that's helping my 2D animation. And that when you do animation, there is several other skills that you could do. You could do storyboarding or character design. And when you're doing those things, they are helping each other. Being a better animator helps you to be a better storyboard artist, and vice versa, because you're learning that there's an overlap with the skills. Okay, now for the juicy stuff. This is what I was really interested in at university, and still today, this is the kind of thing that I think about a lot when I'm approaching shots. So this is strategies for animating complex scenes. And I'm going to use examples from shots I did on Klaus. So hopefully if I mute this, it's still okay. So these are some shots from Sergio Pablos. He animated Tantor on Tarzan and Dr. Doppler on Treasure Planet. I'm sure that you are all practicing and learning the principles of animation, but without a good strategy for how to use those principles on a scene, you might run into problems. So how do you begin a shot? When I look at these kind of shots that Sergio Pablos does, I always just ask myself, how on earth did he do that? They're so organic. There's clearly a plan that he's made, that he's working from, but yet it doesn't feel like, everything's on different timings, everything's overlapping. There's a clear acting formula, but it's so fluid, right? So to me, this comes down to workflow. It's not to do with necessarily how do you do poses, how do you do animation. It's how do you put the two together? How do you step by step build a scene? How do you make something that's as complicated and as layered as what Sergio Pablos does? Now, I don't actually know exactly all the things that he did. I'm not claiming this is his formula, but this is my formula for how I attempt to try and get something remotely resembling his amazing animation. So when I was thinking about this, I realized that actually when I create different things, because I write stories and I do music, there's actually a similar process to animating, and it's 3 steps. You find the idea and you need to sell that to somebody. That might be a director, it might be an audience or a supervisor. And then you execute a rough version of that idea. And then using that as a blueprint, you work out that plan, you do a new layer on top, improvising and refining as you go. So for example, if this was an illustration, you have your thumbnail sketch, you have your rough drawing pass, and then you do your clean and your painting on top of that. So how does this apply to Klaus? I'm just going to move my notes here. So on Klaus, we were put into teams. There was a supervisor for Jesper, there's a supervisor for Alba, a supervisor for Klaus, and a supervisor for all of the minor characters. And we were each put into the different teams. I was part of the Jesper team, along with a lot of other people. And you would work with your supervisor on a kind of daily basis. Several times a week, probably, you would go to the dailies room and you would need to present your current progress to Sergio Pablos. And there was kind of 2 accepted approvable passes. There's a rough pass, which you could approve, and a tie-down pass. But it was understood that for more complicated shots, you could break your first pass into 2, a thumbnail pass. So if you were going to present just a rough suggestion of what you want to do, that would be this. You have the second pass, rough, which really resembles what it will look like in the end. And then you have the tie down, which is the final pass you do before handing it to cleanup. So what if I was in the dailies room right now, what would Sergio Pablos be expecting from me? So this is a first pass rough that I did for a shot where Jesper needs to kind of panic. And this actually went to several animators before it came to me because it wasn't quite happy with how it was going. And he had something in his head that he really wanted this to look like. And he really wanted the head and the arms and the legs to kind of be on different timings. So in order to be able to work that out, I did this really, really, really rough pass. And you can tell like this is just to sell the idea to the director, and it demonstrates my plan, but the character is really, loose, and it might have taken me half a day or something. So yeah, it's really, you need to be able to communicate what you're going to do to the director, to somebody else. This is all about selling the idea, finding the idea and selling it. Then you do a second pass rough. Unfortunately, I don't have the second pass rough for this one. This is the next best thing, which is Sergio Pablos's roughs, which are beautiful. So this really is a roughly drawn version of the final, where you work out all of the motion that goes is involved in that plan. That you kind of like in your first pass, you're making a promise, and here you're now delivering on that promise. And then this would be the tie down. So this is the tie down that I did for this shot. And this is the final version that gets passed on to the cleanup. And really on this pass, I'm focusing on the drawings mainly. So now I'm just going to turn that down. I want to share with you a more detailed view of what I actually do in each of those passes. So now you know what they look like. But to summarize them, so we have the first pass, second pass, tie down. You could summarize it like this. In the first pass, you are figuring out the idea. In the second pass, you're figuring out the motion. And then the third pass, you're figuring out the drawing. So the first pass, when you're given the shots, and when we were given shots on Klaus, so you would go into the dailies room and Sergio Pablos would show you the cut, which would look something like this. So you would have the storyboards, and he would show you the whole thing in context. And some of the storyboards are, almost animated. Like these are Sergio Pablos's storyboards, which are beautiful. But some of them, didn't suggest so much of the emotion. And this is really your opportunity to understand the context. So I would ask as many questions as I can think of. I would try and maybe act it out with him, or it's really the opportunity to ask questions about just making sure that you leave that room without any doubt about what the director's intention is for that scene. It's the chance to explore ideas, not in the briefing room, but once I leave, I get the chance to explore ideas and to find a way to sell that idea to the director. So this is the first pass. This is another first pass I did. So to explore ideas, I would draw out tons of ideas on a piece of paper, and I would go into the reference room, which is a really great opportunity to try and really experiment. You can fly through hundreds of ideas without costing you anything. And hopefully in the space of half a day, you're able to kind of figure out a routine, which is what I get to. I kind of, after doing lots of different passes, lots of different takes in the reference room, I splice together a routine which I think will work the best. And then I take the main kind of poses from my reference and I block it out like this in the scene. So it's the right kind of proportions, but it's roughly drawn and it suggests what the action is. But I don't at this stage understand what the motion is. I haven't solved the lip sync, but I think as well, if Jesper was facing us, it'd be important to suggest the expressions. You're trying to sell the attitude of the character as well. So then this would be the rough pass. This is where I'm figuring out the motion. So the way that I approach this is I start with the key drawings. So I find those, and once I get them, I kind of bring them right on model. So you can see I've brought the model sheet into the scene, and I use that to try and draw as close as I can a representation of the character. And using them as anchor points, I then do straight ahead on the breakdowns, which are, the breakdowns are all of the essential drawings which fill up that motion. Okay, everything that needs to be there to sell the action. And then once I press play, there's normally some stuff that needs refining. This is really the part where you're animating. You are really getting the opportunity to kind of move stuff around, overlap the timing, look at the arcs, all of this stuff, all of the motion stuff is what you're figuring out. But you need, in order to do the motion well, you need the character to be on model. You can't do this without the character being on model. That's why I start with the keys. And then lastly, it's the favorite part, the tie down. So this is where I'm focusing on the drawings, and actually the process is the same as the second pass, where I start with those keys and I put them as on model as I can, and then doing a straight ahead pass on all of the breakdowns, I figure out the rest of the motion. And when I get to those keys again, I'm not committed to them because I want to continue the fluidity and the improvisation. So if I need to change them, I change them. But yeah, it's the same process. So I have some other examples to show you, but before that, I want to briefly talk about straight ahead versus pose to pose. I'm sure that probably many of you know about these two different kinds of strategies, but for those of you who don't, pose to pose is used for control. So if I was to do pose to pose, I would start with one pose and then the other pose, and then I would do the middle one, the one right in the middle, and then I would do the one right in the middle again, and again, and again, and again, until I have all of the drawings done. And what you'd get is like something very straight and something very stiff looking probably. And then straight ahead is where you do one pose, then the next pose, then the next pose, then the next pose. And so you get fluidity, but actually you can lose control. And it's very difficult to plan what you're going to do because it's kind of improvised really. So in most cases, I use both. And the way that I use both, as I kind of explained before, is that I would do pose to pose to begin with. So I have my main poses, and that's really where I'm committing to them poses. I'm kind of looking at the silhouette. I'm trying to get asymmetry. I'm trying to create appeal, trying to get the attitude. But then I don't commit eventually to them. I do a new pass over the top, and I use them as a guide so that I feel comfortable changing them if I need to. And that way I'm getting kind of the best of both. I get to do the poses, get the poses looking as sweet and nice as I can, but I also get to improvise, and I get to get that fluidity that the straight ahead version gives you. So I'm going to show you some examples of this is some shots I did on Klaus. So I'm going to play this. Have I skipped one? I think I might have done. So this is my first pass. And actually that was approved. So I went straight, I did a kind of two-step tie down where I made it rough and then tied it down immediately afterwards. This is me in the reference room. And here I'm kind of just exploring ideas. I'm trying to get as many different versions as possible until eventually I find a routine which I like, which is here. But I find that I kind of lose a bit of energy and a bit of oomph with the routine. So I try and, when I'm doing the animation, I try and maintain the energy that I had to begin with. That was a lot of fun, that shot. Okay. I also wanted to talk about 3D animation a little bit, because the same process applies there, but it's actually, I found that there's some elements where I think the steps get a little bit prolonged, because you have to, there's more steps in the process. It's almost because there's more frames you have to do, and there's a higher expectation of the animation. I think that's why potentially there's a longer process. So this is, I'm going to put the sound on actually to begin with. So this is a shot I did for Anim Squad. I'm going to play it with sound on, and then you can hear the storyboard.
Jessica, honey, is everything all right?
Yes, Mother. Just a spider. A really big, disgusting spider.
Okay. So I'm going to pause it there. So that was the idea. And I think, you know, when you're doing things as a student, you're at a bit of a disadvantage. Similar to what I was doing here, is that you are not given a brief, you're not given a character, you have to make everything up yourself. And I just wanted to encourage you that when you get onto a production, you have a lot of kind of stuff given to you that makes it a little bit easier. So anyway, that was my storyboard. This is the reference.
Jessica, honey, is everything all right?
Yes, Mother. Just a spider. A really big, disgusting spider.
Jessica, honey, is everything all right?
So then this would be the first block, where I'm just trying to figure out what the idea is and sell that to my tutor, who was Frank Abney, who was a animator at Pixar. And now, once that is approved, I'm trying to figure out what's the motion. How does the character perform? You know, how do they do all of those ideas? And again, similar to the 2D animation, I begin with the poses, the key poses, and I try and refine them as much as possible before figuring out the motion, so that the poses are already good. And that's how I kind of combine the two strategies, as I was saying before. Now in this shot, I actually decided to change the idea a little bit. I felt like it wasn't, the story wasn't selling as well as it could do. So I had to kind of go back a stage. And this is my second pass spline again. So you can tell me if you think it works better.
Jessica, honey, is everything all right?
Yes, Mother. It's just a spider. A really big, disgusting spider.
So you can tell at this stage, I'm not worried about, I wasn't worried about all of the details. Everything was just kind of working, but it wasn't the completed version. So that would, up to there is the rough pass, end of the rough pass in 3D for me. And then we approach the polishing. And that's when I kind of zoom in to everything. I fix all of the shapes and the eyes and the eyebrows. I isolate each and every component, and I freeze everything else so that I'm only looking at one thing at a time. And I try and put all the animation principles into it. I look at the graph editor, and this is the final version.
Jessica, honey, is everything all right?
Yes, Mother. It's just a spider. A really big, disgusting spider.
Jessica, honey, is everything all right?
Yes, Mother.
Oops. I went back a slide, sorry. But you get the idea. This is another shot I did, and this is actually a little bit embarrassing for me because I did the reference and I had to pretend to be an emotional woman, which was a little bit out of my comfort zone, but hopefully you'll enjoy this. So then I translated those main ideas into 3D again. I'm not worried about the poses. I'm not worried about the motion. I just want to try and figure out what does that look like. And then I sell that. And in this case, because it was a more subtle animation, I wanted to go straight into splining because sometimes in 3D, you're almost animating things twice. I'm just going to pause it there. Because the blocking class, you get so attached to it that when you spline, it looks completely different. So in this case, I wanted to get control right away. And these were the notes that I got back from my tutor. So it was a bit overacted at the beginning, and the mouth shapes were overly complicated. And because of the way that I had done this process, this was not, a problem, because I was at a rough stage, and it took me half a day maybe to do that. So to get these kind of notes is perfect, actually, because I'm actually just trying to figure out, what am I going to do in this shot? What is the idea? So I went back to my reference, and I began to study other scenes as well. So this is a shot from The Black Swan. And you can see I'm studying how the eyes are different to the mouth. The eyes are sad, whilst the mouth is what people want want other people to think they're feeling, is displaying a smile. So the eyes are kind of telling the truth, and the mouth is kind of representing the surface level, if you like. So I did a new reference footage, tried to do something a lot more subdued. And then now I'm roughly placing those ideas again. And you can see it's kind of clunky. That's because I know that I'm going to tidy up later. Like I trust my animation skills enough that I can figure out the nuts and bolts of how to make that look better later. But what I can't do later is change my fundamental idea. So in this next pass, I'm now going to commit to that idea, because that idea now works. And now I can work on one component at a time and tidy up all the graphs, curves in the graph editor. This is what I get. Oops. I'm not very good at using this presentation software. Forgive me, I think we're about here. Yeah, we saw me. Place the ideas. Okay, this is the pass. Ah! My apologies.
Jessica, honey, is everything all right?
I think I pressed one button. So technologically savvy. So that was the clunky pass. Then I tidy everything up. This is what I look like. I'm not going to touch anything. So you can see there's still stuff to refine, like the contacts are not perfect. The shapes are not perfect, but it's because I'm going to do them all in this pass where I'm refining everything. I'm tracking all of the arcs. I'm doing all the micro movement, micro eye darts, all of the contacts. And I have confidence to do that because I've built upon the idea, the fundamental idea. I know that the motion works. So I can just really zoom in and go into the nitty-gritty details. Okay. So sometimes, depending on your experience and depending on the shot, you might want to change this workflow or adapt it. So what have we got here? This is Sergio Pablos' work, and obviously he is super experienced. He knows his character well, and I'm sure he probably did some kind of plan, but his second pass rough might look a lot more advanced than what mine might look like, depending on what the shot is. So I see a lot of people doing something like what I've described to you, this 3-step process. But, they kind of, depending on how confident they are, how experienced they are, they sometimes merge steps 1 and 2 together. And they kind of come up with this pass like this, what we're seeing now, where it's almost a first pass, but it's, you know, almost a second pass as well. And that's because they're confident, and it's a risk that you take, but sometimes depending on the stage you're at in production, that risk is worth taking. And I think for simpler shots, I would definitely kind of lean more to merging passes 1 and 2 together and going for something a bit more advanced. Okay, so the last thing that I want to talk to you about is strategies for developing as an artist. So this is the first shot that I did on Klaus. And this is the last one.
Cousin, deceased notice. Holy mother!
Oh, it's a bit laggy. I'm going to play that one again.
Birthday cards, distant cousin, deceased notice. Holy mother!
Okay. So there's a huge difference. I mean, maybe you thought the first shot was good, but I had a lot of help from my supervisor when I was doing that. I found it really difficult to draw the character on model, the perspective, getting this perspective right, getting the acting right. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in this scene. It's quite a basic scene. And, you know, the character's kind of off model as well. Whereas when you compare that to this one, which is only 14 months later, maybe, there's a huge difference in the quality and the draftsmanship and the animation skill. So everybody had a growth spurt on Klaus, but it seemed like quite a few people mentioned that even though I wasn't by any means the best animator there were many amazing animators. I did grow a lot, and I want to share with you some things I did to kind of help me to grow. So firstly, when you're developing as an artist, you need to know your strengths and weaknesses. And that sounds really obvious, but it really just starts there by being super honest about what you're good at and what you're not so good at. And then you need to invent exercises based on those weaknesses. So when I was on Klaus, I kind of saw myself like a musician. So a musician, when they're learning their instrument, they kind of do basic, boring exercises every day that help them, like scales, arpeggios, that kind of thing, that help them to improve later on their craft. And I wanted to discover something like that for me. And one thing that I knew that I needed to improve at was drawing the character. Just getting the model right and getting him right in perspective was really challenging for me. And so I invented an exercise. Every day I would take about 20 minutes and I would find kind of a theme. So for example, cleaning. And I would draw 3 poses of Jesper cleaning in different ways. And then like I would do that in rough, and then I would take the heads of all 3 and I would tie them down. And I would try and get as close to the model as I could. And I would do the same with the hands. So these are just things that like the hands, always hard. And, you know, I forced myself to do it. And after about 6 months, I could draw the character well. And I would do the same for any other character that I was animating on that day. But it sounds kind of obvious, doesn't it? But really, it's about finding your strengths and weaknesses and practicing them, finding exercises you can do that will help you to grow in that specific area. Because I think our tendency is to kind of find the thing you like to do and to do that a lot. Whereas really it's a challenge to try and find the thing you don't like to do and to do that a lot. So the 2 other things I wanted to share with you about developing as an artist. Everybody who is a good artist that I know has higher standards than me. Sergio Pablos, if he says something is good, for me that means it's perfect. And really, like, there's almost like a different language going on. when someone has that high standards. And I think there can be a danger with having standards very high, where you feel, you know, you don't feel good about yourself because you're never doing work that you're satisfied with. But I think somehow, and I can't tell you how, you need to get into a position where you are happy with where you are at as an artist, the level that you're at, but also you are striving for that next level, and you are always kind of going after excellence. And the last thing that I want to share with you today, the thing that I think more than anything else helps you to develop as an artist and to have a lifestyle which is healthy and good in terms of your workflow, is to sincerely love your craft. There's a huge difference between the shots that I did on Klaus that I did because I had to do them, and the ones which I intentionally poured love into. It's a strange thing, isn't it, to kind of put love into the shot that you're doing. But if you do it that way, if you do, or whatever craft you're doing, if you do it intentionally, and if you put care into each stroke that you're doing, and you put love into it, then A, you have more fun, but B, it tends to look better, and you can normally tell. So I think I finished a little bit early, a little bit earlier than I intended, but got more time for questions. So that's it from me. Yeah,
thank you, Daniel. That was really, really interesting. Thank you so much.
No
we do have some questions,
Great.
and I'll ask those now. So first of all, I think if we just if you can stop sharing your screen.
How do I, oh, there, stop sharing.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so the first question then is from Anonymous, and they are asking, is it a disadvantage trying to enter the industry at an entry level if you're in your late 20s or early 30s?
No, I think when I was at Lupus Films, there was a trainee who was in their late 30s, I think. And so he was taken on, it doesn't matter what age you're at. I think the difficulty is with pay, because obviously as a trainee, you're getting paid a trainee salary. And when you're older, naturally, you're more likely to have a family to support. But if you're prepared for the lower salary, then no, age is not an issue.
Okay. A question from Sharon. Have you ever come across a situation when the final pass of the final pass of your drawings looks less attractive than the rough pass, and how did you overcome that situation?
Yeah, it's not an ideal situation. I think normally I work in a way that it does look better, but normally I do it, and then sometimes I press play and it doesn't look good. And I think, flip, I've stuffed it up. And I need to kind of, I don't normally show that. I normally try and figure out what I've done wrong. Yeah, sometimes you can get yourself into a pickle. But I think if you set yourself up properly, you shouldn't get too many big surprises like that.
Yeah.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. So Charles is asking a question related to one of your last slides about having higher standards.
Yeah.
And Charles is asking whether you think it's choosing to have a higher standard, or that as you improve as an artist, does it rise with your improvement?
I think you need to have a vision of what you want to achieve.
Yeah.
What you want your artwork to look like. You need to be inspired by people who are better than you. But you need to be also content with your journey, your place in that journey. that you're never going to get to perfection. So you kind of somewhere along that line. I think if you only are content with where you are at and you have no intention of, you have no inspiration, no kind of goal, I don't know if you'd grow a lot. I think you need to kind of think, that's not as good as I want it to be in order to improve.
Okay.
But still be okay with that.
Yeah. So Johnny's asking, you reference acting was really cool. Would you recommend animators take acting classes?
I have taken acting classes, yeah. I used to as a teenager. I also took them when I was at Lupus Films. Yes, take acting classes, it's fun. And I think it's just helpful to kind of get into the character, you know, physically, to experience that. I think it definitely, if you're only thinking in a 2D platform, you know, screen space, then yeah, you're limiting yourself a little bit. I think everyone can benefit from acting classes.
Yeah, cool. There's a couple of questions around exercises to practice timing and spacing. Right. And are there any recommendations or suggestions that you have?
Yes. So James Baxter came into our studio at Spa and said that he used to do a lot of flicking through videos, live action videos, and cartoon videos to see how they work, how the motion works. That's a really good exercise. Another good exercise is to try and animate without pressing play. Try and do a bouncing ball or something, or move a circle around the screen, trying to get a feel for what the spacing and the timing is like without pressing play until the end, and see how right you were. And that helps you to kind of get a feel for how fast or slow something is based on just the drawings. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. There's quite a few questions coming in now, so I'm just. Luke is asking he's saying he loved the tip about practicing what you're worst at, and how do you go about becoming more self-critical to decide what you should practice next? Do you turn to your peers?
And do I what? Attend to my peers?
Do you turn to your peers to advise you?
Yeah. So for me, it's about being very honest. It's about seeing, I guess when you're working, you can kind of see or take a note of stuff which you find hard. I guess as well, it probably transpires that the stuff that you find hard is the stuff that you don't like. So I think knowing what you don't like to do might be a good place to start. I think showing your peers is an excellent idea. I do that. I show my peers, but I also show people who are better than me. Preferably, you want people who are better than you to evaluate your work. I actually, when I was at university, I would send messages to industry professionals. And sometimes, most of the time, they would say there would be no answer. But sometimes you'd meet someone who was really willing to give their time to critique your work, honestly. And that's what you want. That's really helpful, to find someone who gives you that honest feedback and comes with experience as well.
Cool. Couple of questions about improving drafting skills.
Yeah.
And do you have any tips other than practice?
Well, what I do, because that's a weakness of mine, is I go through Proco. Proco is what I'm doing at the moment. It's a website where they have a ton of free anatomy and figure drawing tutorials. And actually, if you go on the website, they have almost everything for free. So I find it helpful to go through those videos to learn anatomy. And I have libraries of poses, life drawing poses that I use daily. And I do either gesture drawing or anatomy studies. I try and not do the same thing for weeks on end, but gesture drawing is particularly useful for kind of understanding how to create an attitude, how to create life a movement in just a solid drawing. But I think coupling that with a knowledge of anatomy, which I get from Proco, is how I do it.
Okay. Cool. Couple of questions about getting into the industry and show reels and what to put in a show reel and so on.
Yeah, cool. Oh, is that the question?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry, I was waiting for the specific question.
No, just any tips on putting a show reel together and what you would recommend.
Well, I mean, I'm going to probably say the things that everyone says. So as a student reel, it should be about 1 minute long. Put your very best shot first. Your second best shot is debatable, but it's good to end on a good note, so I would put it last. And then from your first shot is your best one. The second, third, fourth, fifth is kind of progressively worse until the middle is kind of the worst ones. But the worst ones should not be the ones you're ashamed of. They should still be like, it's pretty good. And then you can kind of get to the best one at the end. And then I apply to everybody, especially as a student, everybody, and try, especially when you are just out of university, you need to get into somewhere. It doesn't matter if it's not the dream one, you kind of need to get your foot in the door. So I'd apply to everywhere.
Cool. A really interesting question from an anonymous attendee. Any tips for keeping your characters in proportion with the different shot types and camera?
That is like an endless battle. What I do is I bring the character into the scene. We have great model sheets, and so you can really lean on those, and you can scale them to be the right size for the shot. I practice drawing the characters from all angles for different poses, and I can even flip between my drawing and the model sheet to see how that's a really good way of telling if it's going off in any direction. And then when I'm doing my scene, like I said in the talk, I begin with the key poses so that they are my anchor points and the proportions are correct. And then I can go straight ahead on all of the other drawings, and I always have my key ones as reference, and I don't tend to go off too much from there. Also, normally you have a supervisor who can draw the character way better than you can, and you can, especially at the start of Klaus, I was leaning on my supervisor a lot to help me with the drawing, but eventually I got it, but with a lot of practice.
Okay, thank you. When you have to animate a character that has a lot of overlapping segments, which are key to good shapes, how do you not get overwhelmed? Do you approach it differently in 2D versus 3D?
Oh, good question. So I think the key with this one is to firstly establish your acting. So in that first pass, you really need to figure out your idea. And then in the second pass, you're figuring out the basic overall motion of the whole thing, not worrying about overlapping action at that stage. And then you can start overlapping stuff. Once you've pressed play and it's looking okay, the gist of it is there, then you can offset stuff. And it's good that we're not working on pencil and paper normally, because you can just cut stuff out, paste it, you can move it around. And it's the same for 3D, really. The process is almost exactly the same. I figure out the overall movement and the overall acting, and then I can go into each component, only do one thing at a time. I can't do more than one thing at a time. So I figure out the torso. If there's a lot of overlapping action, everything comes from the torso outwards. So the torso and the chest, so it's always hips and then chest. And then I usually do the head. And then you kind of work down the body and outwards to do all the other overlapping action.
Okay. Thank you very much, Daniel. I'm afraid we're out of time. I know that there's other questions, but unfortunately, we have another speaker about to start.
That's all right.
Thank you so much for your time. It was a fascinating talk. I personally loved seeing the different stages and the different passes of your work.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you very much. For everybody else in the webinar, Pete Ellis from Naughty Dog is about to start his talk, and he's going to talk through he's going to talk you through one of the levels he designed for The Last of Us 2. Otherwise, Daniel, thank you so much, and we hope to have you over in Middlesbrough
yeah, that'd be great.
A talk in the very near future.
All right, that'd be good.
Okay. Thank you.
Right,
thank you, everybody. Thanks for the
everyone.
questions.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you. Bye-bye.